These are my responses to the Monopoly and Stratified Monopoly discussion questions. So the first question is what happened in general at your board. And so basically it started with 4 classes: upper, middle, working, and poor. It ended with 3: upper, middle, and working. However, people within the middle, working, and poor classes had very little change in their gross worth at the end of the game, while Diana, who was in the upper class, actually doubled the amount of money that she was worth. So what happened to me in particular is I actually combined my assets with Jeremy and Kira because we pretended to me and Jeremy pretended to get married, and Kira we pretended to adopt. So basically, me and Jeremy, we were both middle class. We stayed middle class. There were gross worth decreased, and Kira actually, who started as working class, came up to middle class. So she actually ended up better off. Me and Jeremy, though we stayed the same class, did decrease in gross worth. So basically, I wasn't too upset with where I ended up since I stayed middle class. And however, it was frustrating to see Diana double her money while everyone else was struggling just to make money, and especially the poor and working classes had to work really hard to keep from losing money. So trends in social mobility, I guess basically there was very little social mobility. Our game was a little different because we did me, Jeremy, and Kira combined, and also Sienna and Li Hong combined. So there was a little bit more social mobility, I think, because of that, because Li Hong was able to move from poor to working because of his marriage to Sienna, and Kira was able to move from working to middle class. However, overall there was very little social mobility, and basically the upper class stayed the upper class and made a lot of money, while all the rest of the classes changed very little. So there were class alliances formed, and you could see those informed between me, Jeremy, and Kira, and Sienna and Li Hong. There was also a little bit of class conflict, especially between Diana and Li Hong. And Li Hong was the poor class, and Diana was the upper class. And so she ended up sending him to jail just because of dissent, because he was talking about how unfair some of the rules were, and disagreed with how Diana was acting a bit like a dictator. So that just kind of showed a little bit of the conflict between the classes. And then what does this tell us about a classless society or about elite deviance, is that if you're rich, it's easy to what's the word? It's easy to control the lower classes and keep them from moving up in society, while if you're if you're in the lower class, it's very hard to improve your situation. And a classless society, I don't think exists, because there's always going to be differences in wealth unless you're completely communist and somehow find a way to divide it evenly. But as long as there's differences in wealth, there will be class differences in what classes exist. And so I think classless society isn't possible, and that's what was demonstrated through this game. And then the final question is, what kind of real-world institutional structures or power relations can you see being modeled here? So obviously the power relations between the upper class, who often have control of the government and the rules that are the law, and have a larger influence over the banks, and what loans are made, and who has purchasing power. And there's a power relation between them and the lower classes, who tend to have more people. So while there was this ability for the lower classes to speak out against the upper class, it was still quite difficult for them to actually make changes within the society and to overcome the laws and the government structures that the upper class had put into place. So yeah, that's my blog. Thanks.